Hi Sugar Snaps. Today I want to show you how to prepare a heat extraction bath for your natural dyeing. So I have a couple tools and materials here. I have a pot of water, a bowl of water for washing my dye material. I have calendula flowers that I'm going to use as the dye material, and this is an experiment, so we'll see what color we come up with these. I have a stirring fork, or you can use a spoon, a sieve to remove the plant debris from the dye bath once it's done. I have some mordanted wool yarn here to dye, a measuring cup, an extra bowl, an electric scale, and a meat thermometer. This thermometer has a probe that I put into the dye bath just to make sure what temperature I have it at. And I like this one. This is a Maverick barbecue thermometer, but I like it because I can set the temperature that I want it to reach, and it will, it has an alarm that will alert me when it reaches that temperature. So I like this for natural dyeing because when I'm mordanting or doing a scouring bath, usually I want it to get up to 180 degrees. So setting it to 180 degrees and then having the alert, I can go and do other things while it's heating up. So I like having this guy around. You can check out up here in the circle with the eye in it, up here at the top of this video, there is more videos, a mordanting, scouring, and other natural dye videos that I have done if you want to know more about natural dyeing. So right now, let's get started in heat extraction. So heat extraction dye bath is when you are putting the dye material into a pot of water and you're slowly extracting the pigment from the plant using heat. So to do that, I'm going to start by rinsing off my calendula in this bowl of water. So I'll dump them off. I want to remove any dirt or grime that might be on them. So I'm just going to swish them around in the water, just dump them in and swish them around for a few seconds to get off any dirt. And then transfer them into the pot of water by scooping them out and just setting them in the water. Like so. Okay, for dyeing with plants, you want to take a measurement of the fiber that you're going to be dyeing and the material that you're dyeing with. So I have my wool yarn here. I'm going to take the scale and take the amount of fiber that I have, or weight of fiber, WOF. That's what will be abbreviated in on natural dyeing recipes or online. So this is damp. It's pre-mordanted with alum and cream of tartar, so it's damp. If you mordant before you natural dye, you want to keep it damp. Don't let it dry out, especially with alum, because it won't interact with the dye as well. So I just had this in the fridge in a Ziploc bag, ready for me to natural dye. So I'm going to set this on my scale, and I have 3.7 ounces of wool yarn here. So I'm going to round that down because it is damp to 3 ounces. So I have 3 ounces of yarn, and now you're going to weigh out the amount of dye material you have, or plant material. And I'll do that by setting my empty bowl onto the scale and tearing it. So setting it so that it's 0, it doesn't weigh the bowl. And then I'll put the plant material into the bowl and weigh the amount of material that I have. And you want to have equal parts fiber and dye material, so you want them to weigh the same. You can do less or more. You'll get either a weaker dye or a stronger dye, depending on what you're going for. I like to err on having a little bit more than the fiber that I have. This amount of plant material is 2 ounces, so it's less than the amount of fiber that I have. but I'm going to experiment with it and see what happens. So go ahead and weigh your material out and see how much weight you have between your weight of fiber and your weight of dye material. Okay, so now you want to take your pot and place it on the stove on low heat. When you're doing a heat extraction bath, you want to bring it to temperature really slowly. Bring it to a warm temperature very slowly so that you're not cooking your flowers or your plants, and it's allowing the pigment to slowly extract rather than bringing it to a boil or a simmer and trying to force extraction. So I like to put it on the stove for an hour to 2 hours to just on low heat to just allow that the heat to extract any dye that is possible. So put this on your stove and go ahead and start heating it now. Okay, the calendula dye is done, and now I'm going to transfer it from the pot into the bowl. I'll set my strainer on the bowl here, and I'm going to use the strainer to catch all of the leftover plant debris. So I'll transfer the water in, catching all the flower debris in here, and pull out any excess debris out of your pot, because we'll then transfer the dye bath back into your pot and set the bowl aside. Now your pot is ready to add dye material or your yarn, and you can put this back on the stove and keep heating it at a low temperature for an hour to 2 hours, or until your yarn has absorbed all of the pigment in the water. Typically that takes between 1 or 2 hours. I have some wool yarn here that I have scoured and mordanted with alum and cream of tartar, and so I'm going to put this into my pot with the calendula dye and mix it up slightly, and then place it on the stove. Okay, so we have a bath of hibiscus flowers here that I'm going to strain and use the bath as my dye bath. So I have a strainer and a bowl. I'm going to set up my strainer here and strain the hibiscus through this strainer. So just dump it in through the strainer and allow the water to go all the way through, and then scrape out all the dye or all of the plant material into the strainer so your pot is clear. Okay, so my pot is cleaned out. I'm gonna go in and press into the plant material, the hibiscus flowers here, to strain out any excess dye that might be lingering in them. And then I'm going to dump this back into the dye pot. Set the extra aside. And I did one heat bath with the hibiscus flowers, and I will do a second heat bath and add that liquid to the dye pot to create more dye. These hibiscus flowers are pretty pigmented, so I can probably get at least 2 extractions from just this amount of hibiscus flower. So now with this dye bath, I'm going to fill the pot half full of water, or enough to cover the material I'm going to be dyeing, and then put the dye material in. So I've filled up my pot with more water, and I have a skein of wool yarn that is mordanted with alum and cream of tartar. So it's scoured and then mordanted, and now I'm going to stick it in my heat dye extraction bath. Just dump it in and then use your spoon to stir it around. And it looks like it's gonna be a nice pink color, but I'm gonna stir it around a bit and then stick this on the stove and let it sit on the stove at medium-low heat for 1 to 2 hours, or until the dye bath begins to clear as the yarn takes on the color of the pigment, and as your yarn begins to darken. You can pull it out and check it every once in a while to see the color that's occurring. And don't be surprised if when you pull it out and then you rinse it out at the end, if more of the dye rinses out, because sometimes it will look like a dark color and then you rinse it out and some or all of the dye washes out, and that's when the dye is not truly a dye, it's more of a stain, and it isn't appropriate for the fiber you're using or for dyeing in general. So I'm going to put my pot on the stove at medium-low heat and let it set for 1 hour to 2 hours.